This is
WAW!
What a week.
What a week. PoliTricks.
Welcome to WOW What a Week. WOW is on the Africa Podcast Network, available on Spotify and all other platforms. We're not sure how many other people in South Africa share the name spelling of his surname, but he definitely puts the moi in Moiloa. Let's welcome back our MOI, as in our Minister of Interpretation, Botsang Modimowame Moiloa. How you doing, brother?
Good morning, Fresh, and morning also to the viewers and followers.
One of the big stories this week, President Ramaphosa signing the Electoral Amendment Bill for independent candidates to contest elections into law. Why is there such an uproar about this bill?
Finally, let's say it has happened.
Yes.
And the government has proved that they can actually pass a bill into law in less than the normal 5 years or 6 years they take.
Although they were late already.
They were late in terms of the Constitutional Court decision. But also, if you look at that, it was only deposited as a bill into Parliament National Assembly in January 2022. So they moved faster than they did. Usually, thumbs up for that. It is. I don't know why it's an uproar, but I've seen also some media houses, they are calling it a controversial, amended act or bill. I don't know what's controversial about it, because what it does, it creates an opportunity for individuals in the Republic of South Africa to can contest elections without belonging to or being affiliated or associated with a registered political party. And again, we have said before, we are a growing democracy. We are still in an infancy stages. We are growing democracy, and it allows people. There's been a call to say, why don't voters elect who they want to lead this country? Let's say if Fresh decides to wake up and say, I'm going to contest for being the president of this country, indeed he will still be elected or voted to by the National Assembly or members of the National Assembly, who now are going to be including independent people. So that's basically what this law prescribes. And an opportunity it creates for 2024 elections already, both provincial as well as national.
The IEC are saying if it's challenged, it could affect the elections in terms of it being delayed.
Absolutely. If it's challenged, obviously the legal process may delay the elections in the country. But this was unanimously supported, by a number of leading political parties in the National Assembly, the ANC itself with most of the numbers, and the EFF. But again, who will be challenging it except maybe the DA may sit and say they are going to challenge it, but they don't have the numbers, and it was a court decision for Parliament to do. So I don't think it will make sense for anybody or party who goes to Parliament to decide to challenge, or to court to decide to challenge what the court has ruled on it. Maybe the technicalities and the methods and modalities which has been put on the table may face challenges.
One of the big complaints is it bans a candidate from being on the proportional representation list.
Yes.
Surely there's a problem.
It is a problem, and again, it gives a leeway to political parties to continue dominating. Understand?
Yeah. So how is that democratic?
Look. Democracy is not a fair process at all times. It's a myth that democracy is fair. But the problem here is the majority of the people who will be voting inside the National Assembly or who supported this bill are bigger in numbers, and therefore that's where democracy works, to the advantage. But I don't think it was just for this bill to go ahead and say individuals can come in, but you can't. It takes away now all the number of seats that you may benefit. It takes that away. You will go there on your own and you'll be alone for sitting in the National Assembly. I don't think it's a just process. And that could be a challenge. But again, it's a wait-and-see situation.
Should it be challenged, or should we wait for the elections?
In my view, like I said, I've already said, I don't think they will win. But in my view, I think South Africans should rise, especially those individuals who are intending to stand up for elections. I woke up this morning thinking maybe that's the route I must start taking. I think it should be challenged. I think those individuals who are intending, who have the money, who can raise the numbers. I looked at the figures, by the way. If you are coming from Gauteng and you are contesting for provincial, you need about 8,900 signatures of people nominated. So it's not a lot. Individuals can achieve that. But I think they should challenge only only that part I have a problem with it, of the proportional seating and the number of seats one may occupy in the National Assembly.
Yes, because I read that, for instance, of the 400 seat, you can only contest 200 of those.
Exactly, because they have left half of that to the existing political parties. Again, that is not fair. That's not a fair playground. It's the same as people who are coming from outside Parliament and National Assembly saying political parties that are already in the system are getting grants from the IEC, and those that could not make it and they've already registered and paid, they must redo another process because they couldn't make a cut to a certain percentage. And I think it is not a just process, but it's a democratic process.
Thabo Bester is finally in the country.
Yes.
Obviously, we wait and see as the case unfolds.
Exactly.
But one of the big stories right now is, why was 1.4 million rand spent on a private jet to fly them into the country?
Well, I listened to the Minister of Home Affairs explaining. First of all, he was explaining why it came out of the budget of Home Affairs. I had expected it to come from the police, but remember, they were not, abducted there by the police or Interpol. They were handed over diplomatically in Home Affairs and immigration processes. Again, for me, it's upset. The government wasted a lot of resources, 1.4 million for the jet only. And let me tell you, I sat down and I did a thumbs-up estimate of how much they would have spent. We are only talking about the jet, 1.4 million.
You flew someone from Brazil back in your days.
Yes.
And you flew commercial.
Yeah, there was no commercial flight. And there were, like I said before, there were South African and Brazilian police escorting that, prisoner and myself as an commercial consulate. On a commercial flight, on an SAA flight, on a national flight. I don't know why it was done this way, but the minister tried to explain it to say the Tanzanian authorities had actually instructed South Africans that they can only move those people in a certain manner. I do not think that an authority of an account can dictate to another one the mode of transport to use. I don't think that was an honest answer. But again, even if it's not commercial, we've got jets in this country that belong, at least 2 jets that belongs to the government. We could have just changed those jets, one to the Air Force and the presidential jet or whatever. Why? I understand that they needed a 14-seater to can seat 9 officials plus Bester and so forth. Why not use the Air Force jet, go and spend 1.4 million? And that was not all. There's a lot of money. Bester is expensive. It doesn't come very cheap. There's a lot of money that has been spent on this guy. And I'll tell you, remember he was transported also from the airport, Lanseria, to Kosimampuru, from Kosimampuru to Bloemfontein and back. So this back and forth is going to cost us a lot of money. But there's also issues that these officials who traveled to Arusha, and some traveled from the embassy in Dar es Salaam to Arusha, it costed us money. It was not only the jet, the SNT, which is the service and transportation, allowance, accommodation, and all those things that we spent to go and bring Dr. Magudumana and Thabo Bester out to South Africa. It has costed us a lot of money. I think it's over 3 million.
Yeah.
And it is just the beginning. More and more is coming. So it's an unfortunate situation. I know they were rushing. I know they wanted to be very meticulous with this, but you don't have to overspend money that we are struggling with in order to do the right thing. Understand? You don't have to do that. They should have used the Air Force jet. They should have used flew commercial with all the necessary escort and put them. What danger were they posing? They were not armed people. They were already under detention. So what more harm could they cause?
They weren't even in chains when they got off the flight.
Exactly. So I don't understand. I think it was a fruitless and unnecessary expenditure that the government has incurred, which was uncalled for.
Now, Minister De Lille is axing the dysfunctional SA Tourism Board.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
This board, she already, as they resigned, the chairperson and 7 other board members resigned while she was awaiting for an answer.
I was going to say, it's surely just formality to disband it because majority of them were gone anyway. I think, just 3 were left?
So there's only 3 were left.
Yeah.
But she had already issued letters to the entire board to say they must, explain to her why shouldn't they be fired. fired
Sure.
for their conduct and the manner they behaved. And it's so funny how the conduct of the board members of South African tourism was never in the media and until the change of management or the change of political leadership. And suddenly the entire board was facing serious allegations. And for them to resign on those allegations again, are they saying to the nation, yes, we did this and it was unjust, it was uncalled for? I mean, one of the things I read is that they were supposed to hold, for example, let's say 14 meetings.
No, I think it's a board meeting every quarter. It's
Every
about
quarter,
four.
yes. But you can have ad hoc one and subcommittee meetings in total.
But they had a ton of them.
And they had over 50.
And they get paid each time they sit, right?
Yes, they get paid. And there's a lot of money that was spent, over 2 million that was spent on them for having additional meetings. Some of those meetings actually, instead of one per quarter, at some stage they had about 34 in a quarter. And of those meetings. And I think that, I'm a preacher of the state must go and recoup those monies from those people. If people were unduly paid, unfairly benefited from state resources, the government must go for those people. They must pay back the money.
Speaking of boards, SAA finally have a board.
Well, the SABC as well, SABC doesn't have the board, but SAA has what the media and the people have termed a secret board that Minister Pravin Gordhan never consulted with the ANC as a normal practice. Nothing in the law forces a minister to consult a political party.
Okay.
It is not a prescription. It is just been a practice culture within the ruling party that the minister will consult because they've got a deployment committee.
Sure.
That coincidentally is normally chaired by the deputy president of the country. Now, Minister Gordhan did the unusual. He woke up and he decided, I'm not going to consult the ruling party that has deployed me. I'm not even going to tell the media. So he appointed this, what they call an interim board, and without public nominations, informing the public why is he nominating those people, and boom, guess who he takes? His best friend Derek Hanekom. And you can see in the history of the ANC in the last few years how Derek Hanekom as well as Pravin Gordhan, they've actually not been towing the line. They do their own thing, their own way, and they get away with it. So I think it's an unfortunate situation. You don't want to say you want to clean up a system and you do things in secrecy. If you want to clean up in a public office, clean up in a public space so that the public should know what are your intentions or what you are doing. But I think it has been the conduct and the behavior of Minister Pravin Gordhan not to listen to headquarters of the ANC. Good for some of us who are not from the ANC that one of them is defying them. But also it will cause chaos within the ruling party, and that will affect actually service delivery and how that board is going to function, because some people will start revolting and rebelling against that board, and they may not even get cooperation from some of the deployees of the ruling party. So there's some of the challenges he may be faced with.
Let's leave the borders of South Africa and Africa for a second. Marcus Jooste failed to show up in a German court, and now there's a warrant of arrest. Let's talk about that.
The warrant is not yet issued. It may take, according to the German processes, it may take some few weeks for it to be issued. But what the German prosecuting authority has done, they've requested the court in Oldenburg, that's one of the towns there where the case was being heard, to issue a warrant of arrest, international warrant of arrest for Marcus Jooste, which will take us to our story of last week. The sending of a person from one country to another, extradition and so forth. I think they've got good grounds to can receive that warrant. I've read and listened to the arguments of Marcus Jooste's lawyers.
What are the arguments?
One clumsy, lousy argument that he was not supposed to leave South Africa because of investigations in South Africa, and he didn't have his passport.
Did that lead to the court, though?
No, the court did not buy the story, because what the German authorities have done now, they contacted the South African authorities, the WACs, the National Prosecuting Authority, the Department of Justice, and the Asset Forfeiture Unit, because remember, a few years back, the Asset Forfeiture Unit, seized some of the asset that belongs to Marcus Jooste, whom I actually regard as good. Marcus Jooste is actually the greatest a thief of all times. I've never seen a person stealing so 200 billion rands from South Africa. And part of that money comes from the government employee pension fund. That he is swindler, he's a thief. That's what we should call him. But also, the fact that he could not go and face music in Germany and say he didn't have his passport. Guess where is his passport? It's with his lawyers. It's not with the government. There is no restriction in South Africa at the moment from the government that says Jooste should not travel. Like when people are on bail, to say don't travel, don't leave the country. There's nothing like that. So the passport was with the lawyers who now come and claim that they thought he could not travel. But I think the German authorities must stand very firm and arrest Jooste. He must go and face the court and face the music. The funny thing happened in that case again, his co-accused, who was his right-hand person in Germany and Europe, Evans, I think so, his case was thrown out because he couldn't appear on his own without Jooste.
Oh, yes.
So then he was given a fine or a penalty of 30,000 euros, which amounts to a mere 600,000.
It's a slap on the hand.
A mere 600, it's a slap in the hand to say bye-bye. But Jooste must still face this. This was a very big international fraud and scam, money laundering that he embarked on. And I know in the German authorities, they will not play marbles with him.
Speaking of battles, war in the Sudan, what on earth is happening there?
Back to square one after the guns were silenced in Africa for quite some time. Actually, I don't know how true the story is, but I saw somebody tweeting the other day to say, by the way, when the Zumas were at the helm of Africa, Jacob Zuma as the president of South Africa, and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as the AU chair, guns were silenced in the continent. I haven't checked and tested. I can't remember if there were any guns, making sounds in Africa during that era. But again, in Sudan, it's a step backwards. It's a sad state of affairs. We would recall that what happened in Sudan a few years back. These two generals, one is the army general.
They get along.
They actually ganged up against al-Bashir.
Yes.
And toppled him. So one was a general of the special forces, one was for the military country. They toppled al-Bashir, they took up and they said, let's go and run the country. Now the two people have caused this country. In less than 5 years, the country is in a war and the guns are blazing in Sudan. And guess who's suffering? The children, the women, and ordinary citizens. But you look also, this is where one should look deep into the politics there. Who is involved? It's the French and the Americans. One of these generals is backed by the French historically. Another one is in line with the Americans. You have Russia moving in there, one or two. But again, this influence comes from international forces and that are trying to influence the situation. And we know the battle in Sudan is the same as in the GRC. We know what's in there. It's for the minerals, mainly the oil, and all other natural rich minerals that country possesses. So it's the battle and scramble for African minerals. And let's just hope and pray as a nation that the African Union must intervene swiftly and as much as possible for that war to come to an end. Otherwise, we're going to start experiencing unrest again within the Horn of Africa. And we don't need that as a nation. The continent must again go back to square one. Lots of efforts by the African Union forces. We deployed a lot of forces there. Also in South Sudan at some stage, Thabo Mbeki's efforts from the time he was a president and then anyway to Sudan, it's a wasted opportunity. We don't need wars in the continent. And I think what Africans should learn to do is to keep foreigners out of our domestic battles. If we can start doing that, the interference of the West particularly into our domestic battles and squabbles, that is the biggest problem we are sitting with.
Because often it fuels the situation. It doesn't help the situation.
It is in the interest of the imperialists to have wars. When Africans are busy killing each other, they are busy milking the ground. So it is in their best interest when there's instability in Africa.
I was about to say, it's not in their interest for Africa to work, for Africa to thrive, for us to get along, for us to trade and get along and not have begging bowls saying we need aid. It's not in their interest.
No, it's not in their interest. And I don't think it is in the best interest of the imperialists to see wars ending in Africa and they thrive. I've said in this platform before, a lot of these countries, particularly the USA, they thrive with, economic wars, and that's the battles we have been faced with. Yes, Fresh, I agree with you that actually it is not in the best interest of the imperialists, particularly the USA, to see, and France, historically, to see Africa getting into peace. Because, these are economic wars. They thrive with instability in most areas. So, as I've explained before, then they come and they talk of aid and building and reconstructing a country. But again, whilst we are being focusing on us negotiating, ending wars and all those things, they are focusing on milking the minerals and resources from the country. And I think that's the way we should keep them out of, our continent. And Africans must stop killing and fighting each other. It is not worth it. And we are not even fighting for those minerals. We are fighting for corruption and political power. And that's all. People just want to be in the ham of politics in order to run the country. But in this age, I don't know why do we still allow, military states in the continent, because they have historically demonstrated that they create a problem and instability. So the United Nations Charter that talks of, peace and security and all that, it's defeated by these militaries, which also do not come democratically. They come as military coups, and that's the challenge we are faced with in the continent, particularly in the Horn of Africa and in East Africa.
In closing, Botsang, the G7 are meeting in Japan.
Yes.
And previously, when the G7 would meet, South Africa would be the blue-eyed boy that gets invited to this exclusive group. But this time around, the AU's been invited, not South Africa. As a former diplomat, in fact, as a diplomat, do you think it's to do with our associations? And should we be worried or upset?
Well, I would say we should be worried. This is a signal of the new world order and the way things are changing. You are correct by using the words blue-eyed boy. There was no need for those West and capitalist countries, the G7 countries, to invite South Africa only continuously and year in, year out from Africa. Actually, it has created a bad name for us amongst our African states. African states were looking at South Africa, as you said, as a blue-eyed boy, as the West puppet, being controlled by the puppet. Why them only every year?
Think we're better.
And we think we are better. We are big brother. We think we are better than them. So it created that problem. And again, what benefit did it give to us for sitting with those G7 countries? I don't think there was much benefit except being able to listen to superpowers talking to each other. There was no special benefit. However, Japan, being the current host of the G7 and the chair.
But they're the same guys who are saying we're going to start trading with Russia.
And that's what I was about to explain. That's where things are going. And if the world looks orderly, Japan to fight NATO and their sisters in the G7 to say, but wait a minute, we are going to start trading with Russia. We'll buy Russia's crude oil and we'll use the yuan, the Chinese yuan, or the Russian, a currency to trade with. Who is Russia? South Africa's best friend at the moment, a member of BRICS. So it shows where Japan is actually saying to NATO and the West, we are not going to dictate terms for us. We didn't have to invite South Africa. We'll invite the African Union, which I diplomatically think it is the correct gesture. Why should South Africa, out of 55 member states, be invited to the G7 when there's a continental body that is representing over half or almost
a billion people?
Exactly, that can represent us. And I think it's a step in the right direction. But it also tells me how Putin is asserting himself with the support in Africa. And that's not all that happened. There are talks now, actually, talking about the G7, that maybe South Africa and Russia should swap the hosting in August of the BRICS summit. You understand? It must go to Russia due to the warrant of arrest after Putin. Let South Africa and Russia swap that hosting. South Africa will host next year if things have changed, but let it go. There is those talks and proposals at the moment. But I think we have too much problems at home. Let us sit here and focus on domestic problems than to rush and listen to these rich countries going to plot and plan how they are going to exploit Africa. President Ramaphosa has serious problems to focus on in South Africa at the moment. He has just appointed Minister of Electricity. Things have got worse. And I think he's got a visit at the moment. Coincidentally, President Gangbo of Namibia is in South Africa for bilateral visit to President Ramaphosa. And these are the two gentlemen that have been mentioned in the Pala saga. So we don't know whether they're going to be discussing Pala or they're going to discuss bilateral relations. But again, I was very disappointed this morning when the president was being asked if they mentioned by the writer that ESCOM, 2 ministers are involved in the corruption in ESCOM. And he dismissed it. It's like, let the law enforcers handle this whole thing. If I'm being told that my children or one of my family members is involved in crime, I will not say the police will handle it. I will engage them. Is it not in his interest to know or to want to know who of my cabinet members are being mentioned by the blue-eyed CEO that I appointed to go and fix ESCOM, and he was in the situation, and he says the situation got worse because 2 of your cabinet ministers are meddling with affairs there. And it's a very disappointing response that the president always, he looks shocked and he shifts things to other people. But again, I think the president must stay at home. Let's leave it at G7 to go and discuss what they want to do. The African Union will come and give member states feedback of what transpired there. It is the step in the right direction. It's a step to improve our relationship with BRICS member states. And China and Russia are sitting right there in the middle of all this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Botsang Moiloa, thank you very much, brother man. As always, very insightful. Very bold and possibly very upsetting to some out there.
Well, politics are not romantic rapporteurs. People get upset with this whole thing. But remember, the bottom line is one has to educate our people, inform the people, and tell the truth, even if it upsets others. And that's the direction I come from.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Botsang Moiloa, find him on social media. Otherwise, please comment at the bottom, subscribe, and give us your thoughts on Botsang Moiloa's insights and analysis. And we are done for this week. Wow, what a week with DJ Fresh. Hashtag PoliTricks. Shout out to AMP Studios, Africa Podcast Network. Pezulu works for our cinematography, our audio engineer, Otis the Flow Fraser, and our guest, Botsang Modimowame Moiloa. Shout out to our executive director, creative director, Kuvesh Mohan, and the show producer, Kelezo Mudisakeng. Email us at waw@africapodcastnetwork.com. Have a great week, in spite of yourselves.
This is